Good morning. My name is RUBENSON. I am the director for Amazon's App Store for Android. Here to talk to you a little bit about monetization for apps. It's a huge topic, obviously. We have 20 minutes and then some Q&A. So my plan is to give a little bit of a store's perspective, lay out a framework, talk about some of the best practices that we see from the developers that are succeeding on our platform, a little bit of a focus on in-app purchasing, and then leave some time for questions and answers at the end. So let's jump in here. All right. I'm just going to give a couple of quick slides on Amazon and mobile and then jump into the framework. The way we're thinking about it is when you monetize, it's not about a point transaction. There's an entire cycle that starts with creating great content. Within that content, having a reason that customers want to make that first purchase, getting out of the way of that first purchase, then really driving engagement and usage in that first app. And then the last point is about thinking beyond one app. So that's the general framework I'll talk through. We have a little bit of data to share that comes in the last few, so hopefully that'll keep you engaged as I'm going here. All right, a few quick slides on Amazon. A little bit dated, but we are up over 150 million active customers at this point. We define an active customer as one that has made a purchase from us in the last 12 months. That results in the US in over 80 million visits per month and over 9 million visits per day. So pretty healthy traffic. Over on the top right-hand side, you can see some demographic information. Generally, we skew, in our view, a little bit more positive than the general internet population, but it's a big sample size, so a lot of what you'd expect. Most relevant maybe to today's talk are the icons at the bottom. Those are a sampling of some of the mobile apps that Amazon develops ourselves. So many people know about Amazon Web Services. We help developers create apps. We have the App Store and Kindle Fire, which is distribution for apps. We're also a developer ourselves, and so we know a lot about what it's like to be on the other side of the fence, trying to monetize in our own way, and have tried to bring that into our business as a distribution channel. Quick history of apps on Amazon. We launched our store back in March 22nd of 2011. At that time, we had about 4,000 apps, and we're now up to about 50,000. There's the light. One of the features that was talked about when we launched was Test Drive. Allows customers to try an app before buying it. When a customer clicks on the test drive, we launch a version of the game on a server on Amazon Web Services. Customers can interact with it through their browser, whether it's online or a mobile device. And we think it's a great feature for discovery and also conversion of premium content in particular. We also have the free app of the day promotion. We've been giving away a paid app for free every single day since we launched. If, as a customer, you had downloaded every one, you would now be over $1,100 in free stuff, which we think is great for consumers. It's also a really great discovery vehicle for developers with products that they want to get out into the hands of consumers. A little more recently, most people know about Kindle Fire, launched back before holiday of last year, and a lot of the in-app purchase data that I'll be showing later comes from our results on Fire. More recently, we launched an in-app purchasing SDK. This was on April 10th of this year. We now have an SDK that allows you to sell discrete digital items, be they consumable or non-consumable, and also do subscriptions from inside your apps, all using the Amazon wallet. So that's one-click enabled, very friction-free in-app purchase process, and we'll show some of the data from that. We also recently announced that we are going to be launching the App Store in the EU, UK, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. We're launching later this summer and are now accepting submissions. And then finally, it didn't make it into the slide, but we recently launched a product called Game Circle. Those are APIs that allow game developers and app developers to enable shared achievements, shared leaderboards, and also game state synchronization across devices and platforms. And so if you haven't seen that, you should go to our portal, check out the SDK. There's some great stuff that's relevant for this group. OK, on to the business of delighting customers and making money. Step one is you got to have great content before customers are going to be willing to buy, either up front or down the road. So when we think about that, we see developers do that in a number of different ways. One way to do it is to help customers accomplish a task better than anybody else can. Sounds simple, but there's a really big market for apps and games that do things well. A couple examples here. These are actually not game-focused. Most of the rest will be. Touchdown for Android, fantastic Exchange client. Office Suite Pro, great program for reading and editing Word and Excel and PowerPoint documents. Both of these products sell for north of $15, and we sell a lot of them. So if you have a product that does something well, customers will buy. They will spend money up front. Another way to do it is to give customers more for less. Sometimes that means you're giving something away for free. Pandora, fantastic free music service, even though they have a premium tier. Obvious utility there. The other one is a little bit more of a nuanced example. That's a developer called Ocean House Media that has licensed the Dr. Seuss properties. They have fantastic interactive books that have audio and some animation, and the kids can interact with them. And frankly, I think they're much more sophisticated products than the Benchmark, which of course is a physical kids book, and they're much less expensive. So fantastic way to delight parents. We sell a lot of those. Be distinctive. That's another way to have great content. Clearly, if you can create a new genre, draw something is one of my favorite examples here. Everybody loves to sketch and draw, turn that into a game. That's a great way to get customers to say, yeah, I want to buy something here. There are other ways to be distinctive. Cut the Rope is interesting, combines elements that had been seen before in other games, but does it in a way with the very lovable character Om-Nom that everybody likes to see and play with, and customers love that, and the game is incredibly popular. And so we see that in a number of our popular developers. They've managed to come up with something that's distinctive creatively that then the brand can ride on. And then the last point I want to make here is that it's important to, in your content, in the design of your game, to get to the core of the content quickly. You probably know this, but customers, they make their evaluation of a new game fairly quickly. And so we find that the most successful games in particular are those that get customers into the core of the experience without too much work. And so I've got Plants vs. Zombies and Temple Run up here. Both have what I would call mini tutorials that teach the customers how to play, but they're doing it in a way that's not peripheral. It's very core to the experience of the game. As a customer, you then fall in love with the central tenet of the fiction, and you want to continue on, and then, as we see, buy down the road. So a couple thoughts on what we see as good content based on what's moving in our store. Creating the first reason to buy. So the first thing we think about here is making sure that the great content is paired with an appropriate business model. I'm going to be talking more about in-app purchasing later on, but want to make the point that paid apps still do sell and sell well. We see them selling primarily when the intellectual property is recognized. A couple of recent examples here: Spider-Man by Gameloft, Pac-Man by Namco. Incredibly well recognized brands around the world. Spider-Man is a $6.99 title. It's selling well. And so if you have something that customers have predefined expectations for, intellectual property they appreciate, you might still consider paid because it works. Freemium works well. It's not a panacea. It works well for games and apps that we find are progressive. There's a fiction, there's a storyline that customers fall in love with. They want to progress from one state to another. They want to enhance their experience. It's that cycle that tends to lend itself very well, particularly in the gaming context. More on the app side, if there's tiered service levels, that works well. I think a little bit less relevant in games, although still a possibility. Subscriptions are an interesting and still nascent model. On Kindle Fire in particular, we have some titles from large periodical publishers, Condé Nast and Meredith up here. Typically, these come with a free trial that converts automatically into a paid subscription. It's early days, but what we're seeing is that the renewal rates to the paid cycle are very high. and the churn or the opt-out rate is very low. And so I think that's positive indications in a market segment where consumers are used to a subscription model that is going to carry over into the mobile context. And I would be excited to see that extended into other market segments that have not used subscriptions traditionally, because it is a seamless experience that's working well. Interesting to see if it could move and be applicable in games. Last point here is just a cautionary tale. We have seen some examples in our store of customers reacting harshly when games in particular push the vending aspect too quickly. Talking about needing to get to the core of the experience so customers fall in love with the fiction and want to continue on. If they have to buy before they can see the core, we've seen bad results from that. If they have to buy to experience a rich component of the experience the first time, we've seen customers react negatively to that. So just, there's a balance in there, as you know, and if you go too far, it can work against you. A couple examples of games that we think do it well there. All right, removing purchase barriers. These aren't going to seem like rocket science, but I think they're really important to cover. Mobile payments are still scary. When a customer is asked to enter their credit card information, any kind of payment information on a mobile device, they get very nervous. They don't understand whether it's safe to enter it on the device. Does it get stored? What happens to it? How does it get transmitted? Does my carrier see it? What do they do with it? Who else sees it before it gets to the person who's making the payment? This stuff is not well understood in the online space, where we've all been buying things for years. It's certainly not well understood in the mobile space. And so, the advice here is very simple, and that is find ways to avoid having your customers to have to enter any sort of payment information on their device, because the fallout is massive. Also, there's so much fear that you want to find a service provider that is known for providing great customer service. If people know there's a human being that they can get a hold of if they have a problem, they're much more willing to convert. And so you want to set yourselves up in that way. We provide this, obviously. There are other companies that do as well, but I think it's worth thinking about. This next point also seems very simple, but we see lots of examples of companies doing it well and then others doing it not so well. You want to, number one, ensure that the customer understands exactly what they're going to get before they have to click buy. After that point, you want no friction, no extraneous clicks, no extraneous reminders. These things, again, these are lessons that we've learned in the web over the last 15 years, and yet we see lots of examples where there's extra friction in the purchase process. Every single step is going to lead to a step function decrease in conversion, and so you want to think very carefully and obsess over that user experience design. This last one is a little bit, I think, more nuanced and interesting. In the physical goods world, we're all familiar with good, better, best pricing. You have a spectrum of price points for a given product or product family. You can delight customers at both ends of the spectrum. You have value-oriented shoppers. You have aspirational, premium-oriented shoppers. They can find the products that's right for them. And for the rest, they feel comfortable shopping in the middle because they know they're not buying the most expensive thing, and they know they're not going for the cheapo stuff. We're starting to see some of that same experimentation in the mobile space, and it seems to be working. And so I have some data here, actually 2 slides down, that I'll show you on that. First, back on the purchase experience, just some dead simple examples. This is a detail page, as we call it, from Kindle Fire. And you can see that you've got the price point there. With one click, it turns green, and then you buy, and then you're done. So you know exactly what you're buying. There are no extra steps. It's an example of a friction-free process. There are others. That's what you want. Really, really simple examples from some of our guides. I can't tell you how many games and apps we see that have an extra "are you sure" step once the customer already knows what it is they're going to buy. It's great, but you don't need it, provided you've been honest with the customer before. And so kind of encourage people to think about that. Pricing. So here's an interesting one. This is looking at data from our recently launched in-app purchasing SDK. Did a study over a period of time with some of our best-selling apps. The orange are the price points of the in-app purchase items that we saw in the study. And so as you might expect, we got a bunch of items priced at 99 cents, and in this study, we looked at all the way up to $10, to $9.99. The blue are the resultant orders of in-app purchase items from these games. So as you might expect, you see a lot of purchases at 99 cents. It's also encouraging that there are customers that are willing to spend $10 inside a game. I think what's most interesting, however, is the blue bulge in the middle. So go back to, you've got sort of your entry price point, you've got your premium price point. If mobile starts to behave more like the physical world, you will see a concentration in the middle, which happily for us is a higher price point than the bottom of 99 cents. And so this is just one study, it's early days, but I think this is an interesting trend, and we see the sophisticated developers starting to experiment with pricing in this way. Maintaining a relationship. So you've made great content, you've convinced people to buy, you've removed friction, it's happened. Now I'm going to share some data that talks about how important it is to keep the customers engaged in the game throughout the entire life cycle. So you experience the full monetization curve now that you've done all the hard work to get to this point. First of all, the first day is important, and this is back from that same in-app purchasing study. So we found that 16% of the value over the lifetime of a given customer was achieved on the first day. But then you move on, what we found is that repeat purchases, which are very important, as we'll see in the next bullet, almost half of them occur within an hour of that first purchase. So what does that mean? It means that if you've got a customer in the game, you've sold them on the fiction, they're in the content, they decide to buy, you can't stop at that first purchase because that first converting session in the game is likely going to be one of the most important, and you really want to go somehow for that repeat purchase. And so you can think through, from a paradigm perspective, what that means for the structure of the game and also your marketing and your merchandising tactics. So an interesting finding there. Hammering home the importance of it, we found in this study that 2/3 of the purchases that were driving the revenue over the consumer lifecycle were in fact repeat purchases. So again, a lot of work to get to that first one, but it's about the relationship. It's about the downstream sale. Then a really interesting stat, more than half of the revenue occurs more than a week later after the customer downloaded the game in the first place. So you've got that first session, that's important. You drive that repeat purchase in the first hour, but you don't give up. Because 7 days down the road, you're still driving more than half of your revenue. So very interesting. And then finally, I think this one is fairly well known. There are whales out there. So small group of customers that accounts for a large chunk of revenue. You want to make sure you know who they are and can take advantage of that. Some data on this quickly. This shows in-app purchases in this study by hour from the moment that the parent app was first downloaded. And as you might expect, it decays over time. As you can see, it's a very long tail, and we've actually cut it off. The other interesting thing about this slide is you see the very apparent cyclicality. Pretty simple, but customers end up doing their purchasing at the same time of day each day. It's late at night, the kids have gone to bed, they're on their commute, whatever it is, right, normalized, it's very periodic. And so you can think about what that means from a marketing and a merchandising perspective, and I think take advantage of it. Here's another interesting one. On the horizontal axis, we have the number of in-app purchase items that were available for sale within these games. On the vertical axis, we have the number of items that were actually ordered from those same games. And so what you can see is you basically have an up and to the right correlation. Very interesting. So I think, again, still early days, and this is a small study, but it points to the fact that consumers are maturing, increasing in their sophistication around in-app purchasing to the point where if you have a broader selection, think back to that price point slide I showed early, customers are able to discern it and can engage more deeply, particularly as you think about monetizing over the life cycle. So again, it's a general trend, it's high level, it's early, but I think it's interesting and shows a direction that, that the successful developers on our platform seem to be moving. Finally, last slide here, building a brand. So this is a slide to say, okay, you've managed to delight the customer over their life cycle within a given game, but you're not done. You're now going to have multiple games, multiple apps, and you want to extend all the goodwill and brand equity you've built up to monetize over the customer's life cycle across your entire portfolio. Simple things to think about. One, do customers know when they're in your portfolio? Do you have a brand that generates strong and unique and favorable impressions that are consistent? Can customers identify your products by the way they look and feel and play? Very important, because customers fall in love with developers and brands as much as they do with individual products. We talked about segmentation, so some of this data that I've been sharing really points to the need to segment the customers. You've got your whales, you've got your active users, you've got where they are in the engagement life cycle for one app, for multiple apps. You can use that intelligence to talk to customers in the right way and lead them to the next step in being excited about your content. There are increasing number of services that allow customers to become excited over and over again, not only within one app, but across multiple apps. Things like Game Circle that I talked about, other social layer services. We're seeing good early success with developers that have adopted this. So a couple examples here. Got a Team Lava example up there, and you can see a couple related titles down below, very consistent in terms of the overall framework of the fiction, consistency in terms of the creative in the game, the icon, and customers find that and they gravitate towards it. Back to Cut the Rope, the brand is the character as brand is plastered everywhere, and customers recognize it instantly, and they're hungry for whatever they see with that brand, and it's working. Things as simple as having a consistent logo. We've got Big Fish up there. Believe it or not, in the massive number of apps that are out there, having that visual consistency is fairly powerful from a discovery perspective. And so you want to pay attention even to details that small, because that just may be what it takes to get that impulse purchase as they're scanning through new bestsellers. So that's it. Talked a little bit about each of those, some of the best practices we're seeing. It's an amazingly short time, but I think more or less on schedule, and maybe time for a question or two.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's great.
All right.
If you have any questions, raise your hand. Todd's going to be the mic runner. And again, please wait for the mic. Thank you.
Hey, Aaron. Thank you very much for the presentation. My name's Harris Korn. A small app development company called Expressions reached out to you via email.
Great.
We have a new app coming out called Left Lane Louie, a racing app. Again, our opportunity and challenges as a small developer, I'm blown away by what Storm 8 has done. We're not there yet.
Yep.
So for smaller developers like ourselves, what guidance can you give to get access to great people like yourself and to get visibility on the Amazon App Store?
Good. Flattery is a good first step. That's always
not a suck up, a genuine compliment.
So honestly, we have lots of developers in our store. A surprisingly small number of you all actually reach out and say, we'd love to engage with you. Believe it or not, in the developer portal, there's that contact us link. That's me, that's my team. We read them all and we respond. So you can either find us afterwards or more generally, just write us in and say, you know what? Here are the things we're about to launch. Here's who we think the target customer segment is. See they're successful on your platform. What can we do together? We love to receive those kind of emails. Great for you and great for our customers if we can find the right match.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Are there any major purchase differences between Kindle Fire sales and the titles you sell through the Android? Have you noticed any behavioral differences in your customer base?
It's a good question. First of all, I would say that Kindle Fire, it's a lean back media experience, and so the first thing we see on Kindle Fire is a lot more purchasing because it's a tablet, which is great. Seamlessly integrated to the Amazon one-click. I think that the nature of the way people use it is driving up not only the number of items they order, but also the price points. I think your question though is really going more towards what is the consumer like on Kindle Fire? What are they interested in? We sold a lot of them, so it's a fairly general population at this point. Gaming, incredibly popular. Not only for the adults that are actually buying the devices, but also we're finding that children's games and children's apps do very well. There are a lot of parents that are buying Kindle Fire and passing them back to the back seat because it's a relatively cheap device. And so products that are targeted at both parents and children do very well. The children's maybe a little bit unique. Media-oriented products also do very well. Again, thinking about how people use this device. Products related to music and video and obviously reading, those tend to do very well. I think those are kind of the biggest trends. Beyond that, frankly, it looks like the general population and people are just buying more stuff because they're engaged very deeply with the device. Thank you. Yep.
Thanks so much.
Very
Awesome.
good.
Thank you.
All right.